I thought my grandmother had forgotten about me. At the will reading, my cousins walked away with millions from her botanical patents, while I got a wooden box containing a single seed and a plane ticket to some island I'd never heard of. I felt like the family disappointment until a local guide on that remote island said 7 words that changed everything. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know what's your favorite kind of plant. Drop it in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let me take you back to the day I thought I'd lost everything. The law office of Campbell and Associates smelled like old leather and disappointment. I sat in an uncomfortable chair, fidgeting with the sleeves of my only good blazer, watching my cousins Theodore and Abigail whisper confidently to each other across the mahogany conference table. They looked like they belonged here. Expensive suits, perfect hair, the kind of quiet arrogance that comes from never having to check your bank balance before buying coffee. I, on the other hand, felt like an imposter. My blazer was 3 years old and bought on clearance. My shoes had a scuff I'd tried to cover with a Sharpie. I worked at the Seattle Aquarium, making barely enough to cover my student loans and rent on a studio apartment that was generous to call cozy. "Thank you all for coming," said Mr. Campbell, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he opened a thick folder. "We're here for the reading of Dr. Louisa Griffin's last will and testament." My grandmother, even her name sounded important when he said it like that. Dr. Louisa Griffin, renowned botanist, holder of 17 patents for plant-based medicines, author of 3 groundbreaking books on rare flora. She'd spent her life traveling to remote corners of the world, discovering plants that could cure diseases, developing treatments that had helped millions of people, and I'd barely known her. Growing up, Grandma Louisa was more legend than family member. She'd appear at Christmas with exotic gifts and stories about rainforests and mountain expeditions, then disappear again for months at a time. My cousin's parents, her other children, had followed her into the business world, turning her discoveries into profitable pharmaceutical companies. My mother had been the black sheep, choosing to become a high school biology teacher instead of chasing patents and profits. As the reading started, I could feel the tension in the air, heavy and suffocating. My cousins sat there, poised and eager, as Mr. Campbell flipped through the pages of my grandmother's will. I tried to calm the anxiety in my chest. "To my grandson, Theodore, I leave my shares in Griffin Pharmaceuticals, valued at approximately $12 million, along with the patents for compounds WM47 through WM63. Theodore smiled smugly and squeezed his wife's hand. $12 million. I tried to imagine what that kind of money would feel like, what problems it would solve, what doors it would open. "To my granddaughter, Abigail, I leave my shares in Griffin Biotech, valued at approximately $15 million, along with the patents for compounds WM64 through WM81. Abigail actually clapped her hands together softly like she was at a golf tournament. $15 million. Between the two of them, they just inherited enough money to buy small countries. I waited for my name, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe there was something left. Maybe Grandma Louisa had remembered the granddaughter who'd actually studied biology, who'd chosen science over business, who'd spent her career trying to protect marine life instead of exploit it. And finally, Mr. Campbell said, looking directly at me, "To my granddaughter, Joy, I leave the contents of Safety Deposit Box 247 at First National Bank." That was it. No dollar amount, no description, just a safety deposit box. Theodore and Abigail exchanged glances that managed to be both sympathetic and condescending. "I'm sure there's something meaningful in there," Abigail said in the tone people use when they're trying to be kind about your obvious disappointment. "Grandmother always was eccentric," Theodore added. "I'm sure whatever she left you has sentimental value." Sentimental value. The phrase people use when something is worthless, but they don't want to say it out loud. An hour later, I was sitting in the bank vault, staring at the contents of safety deposit box 247. It contained exactly 2 items. A small wooden box about the size of a jewelry case and an envelope with my name written in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. I opened the envelope first. Inside was a plain ticket. Seattle to Boston to Lisbon to Ponta Delgada, São Miguel Island, Azores. The departure date was 3 days away. There was also a handwritten note on expensive stationery. My dearest Joy, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably feeling confused and perhaps a bit hurt. Trust me, my darling girl, take the journey. Everything will make sense when you arrive. Look for Maria Santos. She'll be waiting for you. All my love, Grandma Louisa. I opened the wooden box next. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a single seed. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. About the size of a walnut with a hard, dark shell that seemed to shimmer with an almost metallic sheen. Strange ridges and patterns covered its surface like nature's own intricate carving. I turned it over in my hands, my marine biology training kicking in. I'd studied seeds in my undergraduate botany courses. But this one was completely unfamiliar. The patterns were too complex, too deliberate. It looked ancient, like something that might have grown in prehistoric forests. A plane ticket to get to an island I'd never heard of and a mysterious seed. While my cousins had inherited enough money to retire in luxury, I'd inherited what? A riddle, a wild goose chase. I sat in that sterile bank vault for 20 minutes, turning the seed over and over in my hands, reading and rereading my grandmother's note. The rational part of my brain said, this was crazy. I couldn't afford to take time off work. I couldn't afford the additional travel expenses once I got to Portugal. I couldn't afford to chase after some mysterious family errand that might mean nothing. But another part of me, the part that had always felt like I didn't quite fit in my own family, the part that had chosen to study the ocean instead of chasing money, whispered that maybe this was exactly what I needed to do. My grandmother had been many things, but she'd never been frivolous. If she'd left me a plane ticket and a seed, there had to be a reason. I called in sick to work the next day and spent hours researching the Azores. The islands were a Portuguese archipelago in the middle of the Atlantic, known for volcanic landscapes, hot springs, and unique ecosystems. São Miguel was the largest island with a population of about 140,000 people. It was beautiful, remote, and expensive to visit. I also tried researching the seed, photographing it from every angle, and running the images through botanical databases. Nothing. It's like the seed didn't exist in any scientific literature. By the 3rd day, I'd made my decision. I packed a single suitcase with clothes suitable for hiking and unpredictable weather, withdrew most of my savings account for expenses, and headed to the airport. The flight was long, nearly 20 hours with layovers, and gave me plenty of time to second-guess my decision. What if this was some kind of elaborate joke? What if my grandmother had been suffering from dementia at the end, and none of this made sense? What if I was about to spend my life savings on a meaningless trip to an island where no one was waiting for me? But every time I started to panic, I'd take out the wooden box and look at the seed. There was something about it that felt important, significant. It seemed to pulse with potential energy, like it was just waiting for the right conditions to reveal its secrets. The plane descended through clouds towards São Miguel Island, and I got my first glimpse of the landscape below. It was breathtaking. Green hills dotted with small towns, dramatic coastlines where volcanic cliffs met the Atlantic, and in the center of the island, what looked like massive crater lakes reflecting the sky like mirrors. Ponta Delgada Airport was small and efficient. I collected my luggage and walked through customs, looking around nervously for someone who might be Maria Santos. My grandmother's note had said she'd be waiting, but what if she wasn't? What if I was stranded on an island where I didn't speak the language with no plan and dwindling money? Joy Griffin? I heard a voice say. I turned to see a woman approaching me with a warm smile. She was probably in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of deep tan that comes from spending most of her life outdoors. She wore hiking boots, cargo pants, and a fleece jacket that had seen better days. I'm Maria Santos, she said, extending her hand. Your grandmother told me to watch for a young woman who looked like she was questioning every decision that had brought her here. I laughed despite my nervousness. That's definitely me. You knew my grandmother? Louisa and I were old friends. Very old friends. She spoke of you often. She did? I asked, surprised. Oh, yes. She was very proud of your work with marine conservation. She said you were the only one in the family who understood that some things are more valuable than money. We walked out of the airport into the warm Atlantic air. The island smelled like salt and flowers with an underlying hint of volcanic sulfur that reminded me this was a geologically active place. Where are we going? I asked as Maria led me to a well-worn Land Rover. To see what your grandmother left for you, Maria said mysteriously. But first, we need to drive to the other side of the island. It's about an hour through the mountains. As we drove, Maria told me about the island's history, its unique ecosystem, its volcanic origins. She was clearly a naturalist, pointing out endemic plants, and explaining how the island's isolation had led to the evolution of species found nowhere else on Earth. Your grandmother first came here 30 years ago. She was researching endemic flora for pharmaceutical applications, but she fell in love with the island, with its wildness, with its secrets. Secrets? I asked, intrigued. Maria smiled. Every island has secrets, Joy. Especially islands that have been isolated for millions of years. Evolution does interesting things when left alone. We drove through small villages with whitewashed houses and red tile roofs, past fields where cows grazed on impossibly green grass, through forests of trees I didn't recognize. The landscape was like nothing I'd ever seen. Simultaneously familiar and alien, European and tropical, ancient and timeless. Can I ask you something? I asked after a while. What exactly did my grandmother do here? I mean, I know she was a botanist, but she was protecting something. Maria glanced at me, her expression serious. Something very rare, very valuable, and very fragile. Something that certain people would destroy if they knew it existed. What kind of something? I pressed. You'll see. We drove for another 20 minutes before Maria turned off the main road onto what was barely more than a dirt track. What your grandmother left for you isn't on San Miguel itself, Maria said as she saw my worried face. It's not. She smiled mysteriously. We'll take my boat to a smaller island, one that doesn't appear on most tourist maps. The marina was bustling with fishing boats and tourist vessels. Maria led me to a sturdy-looking motorboat that had clearly seen years of use, but was well maintained. This is how your grandmother and I traveled back and forth, Maria said, loading my suitcase into the boat. She insisted on keeping the location completely secret. No helicopter flights, no chartered yachts that might attract attention, just a simple boat trip that looks like we're going fishing. As we pulled away from the harbor, I watched San Miguel shrink behind us. The island's green hills and white buildings grew smaller until they were just a line on the horizon. We were heading northwest into open Atlantic waters that stretched endlessly in every direction. How far is it? I asked, gripping the side of the boat as we bounced over the waves. About 40 minutes, Maria called over the engine noise. The island is officially called Eludi Esperanza, Hope Island. It's been uninhabited for over a century. The boat ride gave me time to think about how isolated we were becoming. This wasn't just a trip to a remote location. This was a journey to a place that existed outside the normal world. A secret that had been hidden in plain sight for 30 years. Hope Island rose from the ocean like a green jewel. Its cliffs dramatic and forbidding. Its interior hidden by dense forest. There was no beach, no obvious landing spot, no sign that humans had ever set foot there. How do we get ashore? I asked. Very carefully, Maria said, steering toward what looked like a narrow gap in the cliffs. Your grandmother had a small dock built in a hidden cove. It's the only way onto the island. The cove, when we reached it, was like something from a fairy tale. High walls of volcanic rock created a natural harbor completely invisible from the open ocean. A simple wooden dock extended into the crystal clear water, and a narrow path wound up through the rocks toward the forest above. Welcome to your island, Joy, Maria said as she tied off the boat. Welcome to the last grove. From here we walk, Maria said, shouldering her backpack. The path beyond the stone wall was narrow and winding, leading through vegetation that grew thicker and more exotic with every step. The air itself felt different here. More humid, more alive, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. Birds called from the canopy above us, but they didn't sound like any birds I knew. The very light seemed greener, filtered through leaves that were too large, too glossy, too perfect. I was speechless. The island felt ancient, timeless, as if it had existed long before humans walked the earth, and I was just a visitor, an outsider in this forgotten world. The trees towered above us, their trunks thick and gnarled with age. They looked different from anything I'd ever seen. These weren't just trees. These were giants, ancient beings that had survived centuries, maybe millennia. We walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the crunch of our boots on the soft earth and the distant calls of strange creatures hidden in the trees. I had so many questions, but I didn't want to break the spell of this place. I felt like I was entering a sacred space, one that shouldn't be disturbed by the outside world. Are we close? I asked finally, my voice breaking the stillness. Maria nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Very close, she said. You'll know it when you see it. We walked for another 10 minutes before the path opened into a clearing, and I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was a forest, but unlike any forest I'd ever seen or studied. The trees were massive, easily 100 foot tall, with trunks that seemed to glow with an inner light. Their bark was smooth and silver, almost metallic, and their leaves were the deep green of emeralds. The canopy above us filtered the sunlight into patterns that danced and shifted like living things. But it wasn't just the beauty that took my breath away. It was the sense of age, of ancientness, of something that had existed long before humans walked the earth. These trees felt prehistoric, primordial, like survivors from a world that had vanished millions of years ago. My God, I whispered. What are they? Dracha asarensis, Maria said softly. Dragon trees, but not like any dragon trees that exist anywhere else in the world. These are the original species, the ancestors of all other dragon trees. They've been growing here for over 10 million years. I walked deeper into the grove, my hands trailing along the smooth bark of the nearest tree. It was warm to the touch, almost alive in a way that went beyond normal plant life. The air around the trees hummed with energy, and I could swear I felt something like a pulse beneath my fingertips. They're incredible, I said, my voice filled with awe. But why are they secret? Why isn't this a protected park, a UNESCO site? Maria's expression darkened. Because these trees produce something that pharmaceutical companies would kill for, literally. She led me to the base of the largest tree where the massive trunk flared out into buttress roots that created natural alcoves. In one of these alcoves, I could see where someone had carefully collected a small amount of resin, a golden amber-like substance that seemed to glow with its own light. The resin from these trees, Maria explained, contains compounds that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Your grandmother spent 20 years studying them. They have properties that could revolutionize medicine, cancer treatment, neurological disorders, aging itself. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's why she kept this place secret. Exactly, Maria said, her voice low. If the pharmaceutical industry knew about this grove, they'd strip mine it within a year. They'd cut down trees that have been growing for millennia, destroy an ecosystem that can never be replaced, all for profit. I pulled the wooden box from my backpack and opened it, showing Maria the seed my grandmother had left me. Is this a seed from these trees? Maria confirmed. But not just any seed. That's a seed from the mother tree, the oldest and largest tree in the grove. Seeds from the mother tree are incredibly rare. The tree only produces them once every 7 years, and only a few at a time. I looked at the seed with new understanding. This wasn't just a mysterious inheritance. It was a piece of something irreplaceable. Something that connected me to millions of years of evolution. But why did she leave it to me? I asked. Why not to Theodore or Abigail? They have the business experience, the connections, the money to protect something like this. Maria smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked truly happy. Because they would have sold it, she said. They would have seen dollar signs instead of dragon trees. They would have turned this into a commodity instead of protecting it as a treasure. She gestured for me to follow her deeper into the grove, where the trees grew even larger and more magnificent. In the center of the forest stood a tree that dwarfed all the others, easily 150 foot tall with a trunk so massive that it would take 20 people holding hands to encircle it. The mother tree, Maria said reverently. She's over 1,000 years old, maybe older. Your grandmother used to sit here for hours just listening to the forest, planning how to protect it. I approached the ancient tree and placed my hand on its bark. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a sense of connection, of belonging, of coming home to a place I'd never been, but had always known existed. Maria stood silently beside me, watching me with a knowing look. The trees are alive, Joy. Not just in the way you'd think, but in a way we can barely understand. They have secrets. They have wisdom that goes beyond anything we can comprehend. I closed my eyes, my hand still resting against the tree. I could feel the pulse of something ancient, something powerful. It wasn't just the energy of the tree. It was as if the entire grove was alive, breathing with a purpose that stretched back millennia, and it was now mine to protect. I opened my eyes and turned to Maria. What exactly did my grandmother do here? What did she uncover that's so dangerous? Maria hesitated for a moment before speaking. Your grandmother didn't just study these trees for their medicinal properties. She discovered something far more significant. Something that, if exposed to the world, could change the course of human history. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. The resin produced by these trees is unlike any other substance on Earth. It contains compounds that can alter the course of diseases, slow down aging, and even enhance cognitive function. But what's more remarkable, what your grandmother spent years researching, is that the resin holds the key to unlocking genetic information about the entire ecosystem of the island. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Are you telling me this resin could change the world? Exactly, Maria said, her voice growing more intense. But in the wrong hands, it could be weaponized or used to exploit this unique ecosystem. That's why your grandmother kept it hidden for so long. She understood the importance of protecting it, not just for the world, but for the future. I felt a shiver run down my spine. And now it's my responsibility? Maria nodded solemnly. It is. Your grandmother trusted you with this, not because you're the most qualified or the richest. She trusted you because you understand the value of conservation, of protecting things that can't be replaced. I looked at the mother tree, its massive trunk standing tall and proud in front of me. There was no doubt now. This place, these trees, this island, it was mine to protect. But the weight of the responsibility felt almost too much to bear. I don't know if I'm ready for this, I whispered. I'm just a marine biologist. I've never dealt with anything like this before. You don't have to do it alone, Maria said gently. You have me, and you have the resources your grandmother left behind. She built a network, Joy. A network of conservationists, scientists, and legal experts who will help you protect this place. You're not alone in this. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was fleeting. The enormity of the task still loomed over me. I had to keep this place safe, but I had no idea where to start. Maria seemed to sense my uncertainty. We'll take it one step at a time. First, let's get you settled. Your grandmother left a cottage nearby, and we need to go there so you can begin to understand the scope of her work. We walked through the grove, the trees towering over us like silent guardians. The path was narrow, but the air felt lighter, the weight of responsibility shifting from my shoulders as I began to feel the pull of this place. The island was alive, and somehow, I was beginning to feel connected to it, as though I was meant to be here all along. When we reached the cottage, I was struck by its simplicity. It wasn't large or extravagant, but it felt like it belonged here, nestled among the trees. The stone walls blended seamlessly with the natural surroundings, and the roof was covered in moss, as if the cottage itself had been absorbed into the island's ecosystem. Maria led me inside, and I immediately felt a sense of calm. The main room was a combination of a library and a laboratory, with shelves full of research journals, botanical samples, and equipment for studying plant genetics. It was clear that this had been my grandmother's sanctuary, the place where she had spent years documenting her discoveries and planning her conservation efforts. There's a lot to go through here, Maria said as she gestured to the stacks of notebooks and research papers. But we'll start with the basics. Your grandmother left instructions for how to continue her work. I sat down at the large wooden desk and opened the first notebook that was sitting on top of the stack. It was filled with detailed drawings of the dragon trees, along with notes about their growth patterns, their resistance to disease, and the medicinal properties of their resin. The more I read, the more I realized how much work my grandmother had put into understanding this place, and how much she had sacrificed to protect it. She wasn't just a botanist, I said softly. She was a protector. A guardian. Maria smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Yes, she was. And now it's your turn. I closed the notebook and looked up at Maria. What's the next step? What do I do now? Maria's smile faded, and she sat down across from me. First, we need to secure the island. There are people who would do anything to get their hands on what's here. Pharmaceutical companies, greedy corporations, they'll stop at nothing to exploit the trees for profit. We need to make sure no one can access this place without your permission. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. My grandmother had kept this island a secret for years, and now I was the one who had to protect it. Then what? I asked. Then we'll continue her work, Maria said. We'll study the trees, protect the ecosystem, and share the knowledge carefully. We'll find ways to benefit the world without letting it be exploited. And, most importantly, we'll make sure that no one else can take what doesn't belong to them. I walked deeper into the grove, my hands trailing along the smooth bark of the nearest tree. It was warm to the touch, almost alive in a way that went beyond normal plant life. The air around the trees hummed with energy, and I could swear I felt something like a pulse beneath my fingertips. I had never experienced anything like this before, this connection to the earth, to nature in its purest, most ancient form. The trees weren't just plants, they were living, breathing entities with a story to tell, a history that went beyond human understanding. And now, I was part of it. I was part of something bigger, something that stretched back millions of years. Maria watched me carefully, her expression softening as she saw the awe in my eyes. Do you feel it? She asked quietly. The energy of the grove? I nodded, unable to speak. The words seemed too small to capture the magnitude of what I was experiencing. We need to be careful, Maria continued. This place is powerful. The trees hold secrets, secrets that could change the world, but they can't be exploited. Not like the world wants. This place is sacred, and you are its guardian now. I could feel the weight of her words settling in. Guardian. The word echoed in my mind. It was a title I hadn't asked for, yet it was now my responsibility. The secrets of the grove, the trees, the resin, they were all mine to protect. And I didn't know how. I didn't know where to begin. Maria seemed to sense my uncertainty. It's a lot to take in, she said, her voice comforting. But you don't have to figure it all out today. Your grandmother didn't just leave you a mission, she left you a path. All you have to do is follow it. We walked further into the grove, my mind spinning with everything Maria had told me. The resin, the compound, the potential it held, it could change everything. But it could also destroy everything if it fell into the wrong hands. I couldn't let that happen. As we moved deeper into the grove, Maria stopped in front of a large tree with a trunk so wide it would take a dozen people to encircle it. The tree's bark shimmered in the light, and its leaves were a vibrant shade of gold that seemed almost unreal. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. This is the mother tree, Maria said softly, as if speaking in reverence. The heart of the grove. Everything starts here. I stood in awe of the tree, its massive roots twisting and spreading out into the earth like veins, feeding the grove with life. I could feel the energy radiating from it, a deep, ancient power that resonated in my bones. I placed my hand on the tree's bark, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt a sense of calm. I felt connected, not just to the trees, but to everything. The earth beneath me, the air around me, the very life force of the island itself. This is why your grandmother protected this place, Maria said, her voice filled with emotion. This tree holds the key to everything, the past, the present, and the future. But it can't be exploited. It's not for sale. It's not for profit. It's a treasure that must remain hidden. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of her words. The weight of my grandmother's legacy, the responsibility I now carried, it was all too much to bear. But at the same time, I felt something else, purpose. I had a purpose now. I was no longer the family disappointment, the one left behind with nothing. I was part of something much bigger than myself. Your grandmother chose you for a reason, Maria said, breaking my thoughts. She knew you had the heart of a protector, not a conqueror. You see the value in preserving, in keeping things safe. That's why she trusted you with this. I opened my eyes and looked at the mother tree once more. I wasn't just a granddaughter anymore. I was the guardian of something irreplaceable. Something that could change the world, but only if it remained protected. That evening, we returned to the cottage, and I sat at the desk in the study, surrounded by my grandmother's notes and research. Maria had left me to my thoughts, knowing that I needed time to process everything. I ran my fingers over the pages, reading the detailed notes about the dragon trees, the resin, and the potential it held. My grandmother had spent years documenting everything, cataloging the species, studying the medicinal properties of the trees and their resin. She had known that this day would come, that I would be the one to carry her work forward. But what did that mean for me? How could I protect this place? I had no experience in conservation, no knowledge of how to manage such a vast, fragile ecosystem. My life had always been about marine biology, about protecting the ocean and its creatures. But now, I had a new mission. A bigger mission. One that stretched beyond the shores of the sea, into the heart of this ancient island. I picked up one of my grandmother's notebooks and began to read, absorbing every word. She had written about the challenges she had faced in keeping the island hidden, about the threats from corporations and pharmaceutical companies who had tried to seize control of the island for their own gain. She had created a network of trusted allies, scientists, conservationists, and legal experts, to help her protect the island's secrets. And now, that network was mine to manage. I set the notebook down and stared out the window at the grove, where the mother tree stood tall and proud in the distance. It was quiet here, peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next few days were a whirlwind. Maria introduced me to the people who had worked with my grandmother over the years, experts in botany, conservation, and environmental law. Together, we began to form a plan to protect the island, to ensure that no one could ever exploit it. I spent hours going through my grandmother's research, learning everything I could about the dragon trees, the resin, and the potential they held. The more I learned, the more I realized how fragile the ecosystem was. The trees couldn't be harvested, not without devastating the entire grove. The resin had to be studied carefully, in controlled environments, to ensure that it was used responsibly. This was no ordinary discovery. This was something that could change the course of human history, if it was handled properly. But I wasn't alone. I had Maria by my side, and I had the support of the people my grandmother had trusted. We would protect this place, at all costs. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself becoming more comfortable with my role as the guardian of the island. It wasn't easy. There were constant threats, corporations trying to gain access to the island, people who wanted to exploit its resources for profit. But with Maria's guidance and the support of my grandmother's network, we kept the island safe. We built a team of conservationists and scientists who would monitor the grove, study the trees, and ensure that no one would ever be able to take what didn't belong to them. We established legal protections for the island, working with international organizations to ensure that it would remain untouched for generations to come. And slowly, I began to realize something. This island, this grove, this legacy, it wasn't just about protecting nature. It was about protecting a part of humanity's past, a part of the Earth's history that had been hidden for so long. It was about understanding the value of preservation, of keeping things sacred, of choosing to protect what is irreplaceable rather than exploit it for profit. My grandmother had seen something in me that I had never seen in myself. She had trusted me with this responsibility, and now I understood why. I wasn't just a scientist. I was a protector. A guardian of something truly remarkable. As the sun set over the grove, I stood in silence, watching the light filter through the ancient trees. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the weight of centuries, and for the first time, I truly felt like I belonged. My grandmother's legacy, the mission she had entrusted to me, was now my responsibility. But more than that, it was my purpose. I wasn't just guarding an island, I was guarding the future. Every decision I made, every step I took from now on, would echo in the hearts of generations to come. The trees, the secrets they held, the power they contained, it was all mine to protect. And I would do so with everything I had. The journey had only just begun. And with that, our incredible journey comes to a close, for now. I want to thank you for being part of this story, for sharing in this incredible adventure with me. But this is just the beginning, there's so much more to discover, and I can't wait to bring you along for the next chapter. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more incredible adventures like this one, don't forget to hit that like button, it helps more than you know. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you'll never miss another captivating story. And hey, before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you protect the island, or would you choose a different path? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, I'm eager to read what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.